So just the other day, I completed my first ever full playthrough of Secret of Mana on the Super NES with my good friend Fates. And this was a game I didn't like for a very long time, but we ended up getting our hands on what is called the Turbo Hack, which fixes pretty much all my problems I had with the game. So now that I've completed the entirety of the game, I wanted to let you guys know my overall thoughts on the game itself, as well as delve into a bit of the Mana franchise. If you like JRPG videos, top 10 videos, reviews, podcasts, and all that good stuff, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next video. Now let's begin. Alright, so my good friend Fates has played through Secret of Mana before, but this is my first time playing through the whole thing. Last time I played it was years and years ago, just a few years after it first came out. Now the problem here was that I had played Seiken Densetsu 3, also known as Trials of Mana now, before playing Secret of Mana. And in my opinion, Trials of Mana is better in every single way. It is just an excellent, excellent game. And so my experience with Secret of Mana was constantly comparing it to Trials of Mana. This past summer, my friends and I all played through Trials of Mana for the first time as well. We completed the entirety of the game together, which was awesome. We used a 3-player hack, which allowed all 3 of us to play through the game at the same time. Secret of Mana is able to be played with 3 players without any modifications, but I was just playing with my good friend Fates. So anyways, we fired up Secret of Mana, and right away I was hit with a wave of nostalgia. The music in the Mana series is absolutely incredible. Some of the best soundtracks in gaming history, in my opinion. We started up the game. It takes a little while for you to get the second character, especially if you don't really know what the heck you're doing. But I ended up getting the girl whose name was Prim. Ended up recruiting her after, of course, pulling the Mana Sword out of the stone and getting exiled from the village after a monster attacked, going after the guy with the Mana Sword, which is me, Randy. So yeah, you end up caught up in this war between like a resistance and an empire. It's a tale as old as time, but the empire has a couple of goons with special abilities that are sent out to devastate the world, and there's a witch that controls the minds of a bunch of villagers. There's a ton of stuff going on. It's up to you to unseal the mana seeds and gain the abilities of all the different elemental spirits. The spirits are what give you your magic, and they also upgrade your weapons. So there's a number of different weapons to choose from. You can switch between them at will, which is super nice. The Mana games from this point on use like these wheels. So you open up the wheel and it's basically your main menu. You can select if you want to change equipment, you can use your items, you can use spells, you can change which weapons you have equipped, all from the ring. And it's pretty handy, but when you get later on in the game where you're constantly casting spells and using abilities and using items, it does become a bit of a pain in the butt because you're constantly pausing the game to scroll through the ring to find what you need to use it, and then waiting for them to cast it, which kind of locks up the game a little bit as well. For the most part, the ring is super handy, especially at this time in gaming when you had to like open a menu. I mean, even look at Zelda Ocarina of Time on the N64. You're constantly having to pause the game, go to like a separate menu, go through the different windows in that menu to find what you want to equip or unequip or use, and then go back to the game. While the ring is far better than that, in my opinion, where you just bring up the ring, scroll around, get what you want, and then keep playing the game. The action combat in the original version of Secret of Mana always drove me nuts because you're constantly missing your attacks even when you're clearly hitting the enemies. The Turbo Hack gets rid of all that. The Turbo Hack, if you're hitting the enemy, you're hitting the enemy. You're going to deal damage, which is excellent. This is the way I would recommend anyone play this game. Now, the difficulty in this game is still quite high. I don't know how anyone could have beat this back in the day single player. The challenge, I would say, is absolutely perfect for a 2-player experience, but the AI is ridiculously useless. Like, the AI ain't doing nothing unless you're scrolling over to them using their ring menu and forcing them to do something. They might throw some attacks, but they're always going to put themselves in danger. We had my good friend DG named as our sprite boy, and he was dead like 99% of the time. My friend DG Online stands for Dad Gaming Online. We changed his name to basically Dead Guy because he was just dead the whole freaking game. The boss fights, some of which are very, very fun, and some of which are very annoying. So near the end of the game, you get into like a boss rush when you get to the Mana Holy Land or the Pure Land, whatever you want to call it, and you're fighting like these big dragons, and the dragons look cool. All the enemies in the Mana series look so cool. Some of them are cute as hell. I like the frogs the best. They remind me of Nibbler from Futurama. But even like the Rabbites, which is like the Mana series version of the slime from Dragon Quest. You've got a ton of great monsters and monster designs in the Mana series, and they always look so cutesy, but they're all so deadly in their own way. But anyways, some of the boss fights, like I said, were a blast to play, and then some were an absolute nightmare. So a lot of times, I'm switching from my sword to my javelin. Thankfully, again, like I said, with the ring menu, it's very seamless. I can just whip out the javelin and start chucking spears to hit my enemy from range. A lot of the boss fights you want to hit from range because they'll do a ton of status effects or a ton of damage when you get close to them. My buddy Fates, he was switching to the arrow at the late game, but he was mostly using spears, and then every once in a while he'd whip out the whip, because another thing that the Mana series does so well, starting with Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, is your weapons actually are used to let you progress through the areas. So for example, if you've got like tall grass or bushes, you need the sword to cut the bushes to get past. If you got like stalagmites in the caves, you need to use your axe to break those down to get past. And then of course there's parts where you need to use the whip to swing across. And my buddy Fates was all over the whip, getting us across to different platforms. I handled the axes and the swords, and it all just worked out great. We didn't use magic. I personally do not like using magic in games. We used healing magic, of course, and like buffs, but as far as offensive magic goes, I'm not a big magic guy, and that came to bite us in the ass in the late game, let me tell you. A lot of that boss rush I was talking about earlier would be much easier if we had leveled up our spells or our magic on the sprite character, but the sprite character was also always dead, so it didn't really matter anyways. We streamed this game, and we got to this boss fight, and everybody in the chat was like, use your spells, that's how I beat it, use your spells. Well, we would use the spells, but all the spells were level 0 or level 1 because I never really used the sprite character. If you want the game to be a lot easier, use the spells, use the sprite character. We ended up making it work because you can cast magic onto the weapons using Prim's magic abilities. I would just slash away, Prim would attack from far, and then every once in a while we'd have to cheese them with some magic to just kind of stun lock the boss for a little while, because some of the bosses have a weird hitbox. Especially these big dragons. They would have a hitbox that was either in like their crotch or their head or their chest, and it feels like it would like randomly move around. They were also kind of hovering on screen all the time, so they would constantly like be moving, and it was really hard to hit these guys. And not only were they hovering when they would stay in place, but they were darting all over the screen for the entire boss fight, making it almost impossible to hit these guys sometimes. This vampire bat that you fight a couple times in the game is absolutely adorable and an absolute freaking nightmare to face off against. Thankfully, somebody in chat helped us find some items that would get rid of the Moogle status and the mini status at any time. We could just use these items, because if we hadn't have got those, it would have been absolutely impossible to beat this game. Overall, the adventure was really, really well done. There were a few parts in the game that I was completely lost, and we had no idea really where to go, or the game would tell you where to go, but because there's not really like a mini map, you don't really know where you are. You can go to the world map and open up kind of like a full world map that shows you where you are, but it never really shows the names of the towns and stuff like that. So it was really hard if someone says, hey, go back to this town, unless you had memorized the names of all the towns, which you don't spend a lot of time in the towns. You're not going to be able to go back and figure out where the heck you're actually supposed to be going. So I would say like navigation is probably one of the weaker points in this game. But other than that, honestly, we had an absolute blast. The story isn't anything deep. Like I said, it's like the whole like Alliance versus Empire kind of deal. The big bad wants to harness all the power from the Mana Fortress and the Mana Tree. And then there's like the Mana Beast, and everything is just, it's kind of machine and magic versus nature and magic, if that makes sense. The lore never really gets all that deep until the very end, where it just kind of dumps all the lore on you pretty much right before the final boss and then after the final boss. You do get a nice victory tour, which as a Dragon Quest fan, I appreciate after beating the game. But yeah, overall, with the variety of the weapons and how they work, you can charge up the weapons when you're holding down the attack button to do special moves with all the different weapons, and the more you use that weapon, the more special moves you get. It's just, there's a lot going on with the game. It's a pretty good game, honestly. It's a game that I have not liked for years. If you were to replay it, I highly recommend the turbo hack. Like I said, pretty much got rid of all the issues I had with the game. It speeds up the run speed. It gets rid of all your attacks missing. You don't have to constantly wait for your attack bar to recharge in order for you to attack. You can just attack rapid fire as much as you want, and then you're not going to be punished for it, which is so much better than the original game was. So I guess what I'm saying is I would definitely recommend playing through Secret of Mana as long as you're playing the turbo hack. I don't know if I could recommend the original. It's just so frustrating to play the original game. Any enemy encounter is going to take way longer than it ever needed to be. We had so much gold and so much EXP because instead of just running past all the enemies, we would actually stand and fight them, whereas in the original version of the game, I would spend most of my time just running away from enemies because the time it took to kill them just wasn't worth it in my opinion. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo. Let me know what you thought of Secret of Mana, if you've tried out the turbo hack, or if you're looking forward to trying it out sometime soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next one, and I will see you in the next one.